Who made money during the 1929 crash? Because it wasn't who you think. It wasn't the stock tip guys. It wasn't the day traders. And it definitely wasn't the people watching the ticker in panic as their life savings evaporated. The people who made money in 1929 were already positioned to win before the crash happened. Let me explain. When the stock market collapsed in October of 1929, most Americans weren't investors. They were speculators. They bought stocks on margin. They borrowed to look rich. They treated the market like a slot machine that only paid out. And when prices fell even a little, the system snapped. Margin calls hit. Forced liquidations followed. And overnight, paper wealth taught people a brutal lesson. Leverage cuts both ways. But quietly, while newspapers screamed and crowds gathered outside banks, a small group did very well. Not because they predicted the crash, but because they understood fragility. Take Joseph Kennedy. Yes, that Kennedy. Joe Kennedy didn't sell at the top because he was a genius. He sold because he noticed shoeshine boys giving him stock tips. That wasn't a signal of opportunity, it was a signal of saturation. He exited early, sat on cash, and waited. When the market collapsed, Kennedy didn't panic. He bought assets, real ones, at pennies on the dollar. Businesses, land, control. He didn't try to time the bottom. He waited until desperation forced sellers to accept reality. Then there were the bankers who survived. Not the flashy ones, the boring ones. Banks that stayed liquid. That didn't overextend. That held reserves when everyone else chased yield. When competitors failed, these institutions absorbed assets, deposits, and influence. Not at a discount, but at a transfer. Crashes don't destroy wealth evenly. They reassign it. The people who made money in 1929 weren't brave, they were solvent. They didn't need prices to go up tomorrow. They could wait. That was the real advantage. Look at real estate. During the Depression, millions lost farms and homes, but landlords with low debt, they didn't just survive, they expanded. Taxes unpaid, mortgages defaulted, properties auctioned. Those with cash stepped in quietly and bought permanence while the public begged for relief. Here's the uncomfortable truth most history books soften. The crash punished dependence, not participation. If you needed the market to behave, you lost. If you could survive without selling, your consideration became opportunity. Even some investors made money during the crash. Short sellers, a tiny minority, profited massively by betting against overvalued companies. But even they weren't heroes. Most short sellers blew up later because timing is unforgiving. The long-term winners weren't traders. They were owners, people who converted temporary chaos into permanent control. That's the pattern. Every crash looks different on the surface, but underneath it's always the same mechanism. Debt gets exposed. Weak balance sheets break. Forced selling transfers assets to patient hands, and the people who win are usually invisible while it's happening. They're not on the news. They're not posting charts. They're not making predictions. They're sitting quietly with liquidity and a checklist. And this is the part that makes people uncomfortable. The winners of 1929 weren't smarter than everyone else. They were positioned differently. They assumed crashes were inevitable. They built systems that didn't rely on constant optimism. They treated cash not as trash, but as optionality. Most people think wealth is built by avoiding crashes. History shows the opposite. Wealth is built by surviving crashes with the ability to act. The crash of 1929 didn't create new rules. It revealed old ones. If your wealth depends on markets behaving, you're fragile. If your wealth depends on ownership, liquidity, and patience, volatility becomes leverage. That's why the real lesson of 1929 isn't about timing or prediction. It's about structure, who had debt, who had control, who could wait. Because when everything collapses, the question isn't, what should I sell? It's, what will I be able to buy? And that's why the same types of people make money in every crash. Not because history repeats, but because human behavior does. Once you understand the pattern behind wealth, the noise becomes irrelevant. If that way of thinking appeals to you, consider subscribing. Until next time.